stress as an environmental influence on your ability to obtain good health is so important. It's just self-perpetuating. I mean, then think about what I just said before with people that struggle with emotional eating or already lacked structure and the ability to have a good routine. So, I think more and more people that are kind of venturing into the entrepreneurial space probably struggle with these things even more because it's even more time consuming.
In a world of conflicting dietary advice and social media influence, it's easy to feel lost when it comes to making healthy food choices. That's why I'm thrilled to welcome Holly Baxter to the show. Holly's a unique voice in the nutrition world. She's a professional bodybuilder, an accredited practicing dietitian, and the founder of Be a Body, an all-female coaching business. Her experience bridges high-level athletic performance and everyday wellness, making her insights invaluable for anyone looking to improve their relationship with food. Today, we'll cut through the noise surrounding nutrition. We'll explore common mistakes, debunk myths, and discuss practical strategies for better eating habits, even for those with busy lifestyles. We'll also touch on the psychological aspects of eating and how to develop a positive relationship with food. Whether you're an athlete, a busy professional, or someone just trying to make sense of the latest health trends, this episode has something for you. Get ready for an enlightening conversation that will empower you to take control of your nutrition and overall health. Good afternoon, Holly. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today and catching up offline before we jumped on here. I read about you and was very intrigued to talk with you because you just have such a wide knowledge of this world, and just your presence online is great. So thank you for the time you're doing with us.
Thank you. I'm excited to chat today.
Yeah, me too. And what would you say, if I had to say top 3 nutritional mistakes that are sort of preventing people out there listening from achieving optimal health?
Ooh, oh my goodness. I'm just thinking about all the things that pop up with my clients. There are so many. Top 3 though, goodness.
Or 5, whatever you feel, like
All right,
whatever the
okay.
takeaways
I
are.
think I have a few. So
Yeah.
I think I would start with saying perhaps lack of routine and no structure. Believe it or not, it seems like such a simple thing. But I would say after years and years of working with people in person that I think just having no schedule is one of the biggest things that prevents people from actually accomplishing any goal, not just in the health and fitness space, but I think just in general. So that often leads people's energy intakes to be really inconsistent. Probably means their protein intake is really inconsistent. It has to have an effect on your ability to, establish a really good training and exercise routine. So, I'd say that's probably the first thing that a lot of people could do differently to make significantly better progress towards their health and fitness goals. I think the type of people that I'm working with, which is primarily females, I'd say the split that I'm working with is about 80-20. So I think for a lot of women, it is chronic stress and the associated symptoms that kind of brings. So anxiety, poor mental health, low self-esteem, poor confidence. With that, I think if people haven't kind of developed good emotional coping tools, as they progress through the years, they tend to develop a lot of really bad habits around food. And one of those things that springs to mind is emotional eating. So I work a lot with women in trying to establish better coping skills to navigate their stress rather than eating their feelings. And once we can kind of work on strategies to be a bit more proactive in coping with, certain emotion, whether it's anxiety, sadness, depression, it could be just feelings overwhelmed, procrastination, all of those things, people's, health in general starts to improve, particularly if there's somebody that's used food to cope. So that would be another one that I experience a lot with the clients that I work with. And then maybe unrealistic expectations. So as somebody that has, been there, done everything when it comes to nutrition and exercise, I've tried it all. I think there is unfortunately still this kind of culture that exists that there are hacks and there are fast-tracked ways to, accomplish a lean physique or make really groundbreaking changes in terms of your muscle mass. But I think the unfortunate truth is some of these processes that are the most sustainable and the most effective tend to be slow and require patience. And none of us are very good at that, unfortunately. I find myself working with a lot of people that perhaps just need a little bit of re-education about, the process for fat loss, like what's optimal, whereas they've probably come from a background of like extreme dieting protocols or extreme exercise protocols. I think collectively they kind of work hand in hand with one another, exercise, nutrition. So those would be the three that spring to mind. I'm sure there are many others as well, but they'd be the most common ones.
Especially if you have kids, you're like Monday through Friday is this, but then the weekends have that schedule and you're trying to keep a routine. The routine for me is definitely hard because weekends I might not start a workout till the late afternoon, but Monday through Friday I can start it right away. But then there's Monday off for this holiday or a week off, so it always kind of changes. It's very hard to kind of stick. And then, of course, work where things pop up and you're trying to work around life. And I think that that's what a lot of listeners struggle with, is trying to figure out how to get that consistent routine going. How about like unintentional, hindrances, like lifestyle choices that we don't really realize are hindering that? I mean, obviously people would know, okay, smoking, alcohol, things like that. But do you notice anything that people are missing about, again, environmental, that are hindering these goals that we have?
I think, our lifestyle choices play and weigh in very heavily to the success of your health. So, we're constantly being influenced with things. So I would say like our career choice makes a massive difference to your capacity to obtain said fitness goal. If it's a really demanding job, that has to have an influence on your ability to, even have a consistent routine. So I know I've heard from clients often, and I've had difficult conversations with them about, their jobs, and it keeps them extremely sedentary. They're not able to move and get, activity in. Social supports, I think, as well, is another really important one. I have many people that maybe have made a big lifestyle adjustment by changing their career. Let's say they've taken the first step to doing something that that is more proactive and will enable them to reach their long-term goals. But they might then find themselves really isolated because they haven't got a good network of friends or a community that are also motivated to move their bodies and eat well. I work with a lot of high-end CEO, executive type individuals, and the culture of their work isn't really one that proves to be very favorable for, being healthy. There's a lot of alcohol, there's a lot of late nights, poor sleep, high stress, limited ability to move. So yeah, I think your environment is really important. I know something that I have done personally over the years, I guess first off, just recognizing that there were certain individuals in my life that weren't probably serving me very well if I wanted to, obtain a sense of balance. So like being okay with kind of stepping away from certain relationships, friendships, family members, romantic relationships as well. So identifying some of these kind of problems and then having the confidence to step away from that. So I know like my social circle has changed significantly just in the last 5 years because of that. I was engaging in behaviors that I knew weren't going to be very productive for me to achieve like my career goals, as an example. The other thing I think that's interesting, I know it's a little bit off the topic, but I think with the way that social media has changed over the years and work from home type scenarios, I don't know whether there's any statistics on this, but I would have to assume that there's probably more people now either working from home or pursuing like an entrepreneurial lifestyle. I think that also increases our, susceptibility to high stress. And by gosh, like stress as an environmental influence on your ability to obtain good health is so important. I mean, it's just self-perpetuating. I mean, then think about what I just said before with people that struggle with emotional eating or already lacked structure and the ability to have a good routine. So, I think more and more people that are kind of venturing into the entrepreneurial space probably struggle with these things even more because it's even more time consuming. I always look back and think, I wonder what it would be like if I had to take in a normal job, a 9 to 5, how different my lifestyle would be because, as somebody that is entertaining multiple businesses and living that lifestyle, it's really stressful. So it can be difficult even for like the experts in nutrition and exercise.
Yeah, no, stress and sleep, I definitely wanted to jump into those two. How do you take stress to begin with? How it impacts our eating habits? Is it the people that just, because they're so stressed, they do it as a coping mechanism?
I think it's probably multiple influences. I guess some people have that tendency, but not all. Stress, the first thing that springs to my mind is that often impacts our sleep. So I'm kind of looking at two different variables here, I know, but the first thing would be, its influence on sleep. I know if I've had a really stressful day, sometimes it kind of bleeds into the evening. Sometimes I'm still working in the evening. And then, that extra like psychological disturbance prevents a good quality night rest. As far as how that influences, your health outcomes, well, it's going to have some kind of a hormonal effect. So it'll influence like leptin and ghrelin, your appetite regulating hormones. So if you were in pursuit of a diet, for instance, or some fat loss for health reasons or otherwise, it instantly makes it more difficult to be adherent to your calorie goals or your, macro targets, because your leptin levels decrease, your ghrelin increases in response to a reduced sleep duration. So it makes the goals really difficult. It also impairs your ability to recover from training. So if you're somebody that's engaging in regular resistance training or just regular movement, if stress is leading to sleep problems, it can also impede your recovery, and it also blunts muscle protein synthesis as well. So, staying up late, working hard and being stressed, it might be serving the need in one domain of your life. It might be something related to career, but it's also taking us in a very different direction, when it comes to maybe your aesthetic goals or your physical health goals. So, yeah, I think stress is a huge problem, but I think if you're aware of your, stresses, and you're mindful and really intentional about how you're addressing them, you can certainly reduce that. Absolutely.
Well, is there sort of like a hard and fast rule for sleep? Like we should 7 hours non-negotiable kind of thing, try to go to bed at the same time every night. Is there like a takeaway that everyone could apply, or is it specific to their life?
I think the human adults generally need somewhere between 7 and 9 hours sleep. I think that's pretty well understood, across the board. So I think we should all be striving to get that many. I'll be the first to put my hand up and say I struggle with that at times. It's really difficult. But again, just having an awareness of the importance that it can have on, all of your goals, health included, and then trying to be intentional with having a good, consistent bedtime routine. And if you are somebody that is fully aware that you need to make some adjustments, I think winding back the clock perhaps by 15 to 20 minutes, over the course of a week or two to kind of settle back in at a more realistic bedtime would be a great step in the right direction. I think people underestimate the importance of sleep. So I'm somebody that's very mindful of that. I try to have my 7 to 9 hours as often as I can, because it affects everything, your cognitive performance the following day, your performance in the gym. It impacts your ability to make good decisions around your nutrition. It might also mean that you're feeling more fatigued and tired, and that might be the extra little bit of willpower that you needed to plan out a good, healthy, balanced meal. The list goes on. So yeah, I think sleep is really important. I track that. That's one of the measurements that I would track with my weekly check-in clients.
How, because I would imagine a lot of parents, mothers, fathers, whatever, with young children that are
Yep.
waking up, constant interruption. Like, how much does the interrupted sleep become a detriment for us the next day? And whether it's performance at the gym, just cognitive, coherence, just in general throughout the day.
Yeah, look, I wish that I could give you some specific stats or science on that. It's a little bit outside my scope of practice. Obviously, I love being in the nutrition exercise space, but I mean, it cannot be good having constant breaking of sleep. I think there's probably something to be said for parents, if you've got a healthy relationship, to find a routine that allows you to both get a full uninterrupted night, rather than both kind of tending to your child and, both wanting to take a bit of ownership. But I think ultimately what would happen in that scenario, if you're both constantly woken every single night, is that no one ever gets a good quality night's sleep, and there's just madness and mayhem in general. So I think having a good parenting schedule where maybe there's some good communication around, okay, we're on these days of the week. I know it seems like probably a burden to do that, but I'm sure that it would have to have a positive impact down the line if you're both able to get, an uninterrupted night of sleep. So yeah, I've listened to enough sleep experts to know that it is extremely important. Yeah, I would definitely start with making some adjustments there if you're in a scenario where you have that kind of constant sleep wake interruption.
Yeah, and when you had mentioned social media, you see a lot of influencers on there, and they're putting out just nutrition information. Some of it's very positive and useful. But do you think that there's maybe an impact on how it makes the average person understand food, maybe the way we eat? Is it better for worse? How we're ingesting so much in these quick little bites of information. Is that having a detriment on people and their nutritional, just overall picture in their life?
You know what? I actually had a conversation with someone just before speaking with you today. And yeah, we were talking about, the pros and cons of social media and, the echo chambers and just, I guess, the authority fallacy. And look, I think generally speaking, social media has been a great tool for a number of different reasons. First off, it's a great place to get educated and to access information. I'm 35, and I remember if I go back to when I was like a late teen, early 20s, we didn't have these platforms to get like instant information. You can type in a hashtag or any topic that you're interested in, and you're guaranteed to find something that has a skerrick of evidence behind it. So I think it's a really great place where we can have the potential to learn a lot. But in the same school of thought, because it's just so accessible, I think it is probably misused, and perhaps people that don't necessarily have authority in certain areas relating to diet and relating to exercise tend to be given more authority than they might deserve. And I don't mean that in like a negative, nasty way, but people don't have credentials. So many folks are putting information out that is inaccurate, and our words have so much power. And I think over the years, when I first came out of grad school, I was just ready to go. I was on top of the world, totally had the Dunning-Kruger effect. I thought I had way more knowledge than I really did. So I was quite outspoken when I first kind of found social media. But I think over the years, as I've kind of sat back, learned more, published research, I'm a lot more cautious and skeptical with what I say. In fact, I do not post that often anymore, at least not on Instagram, because like my goals personally as, a scientific communicator is to make sure that I'm putting out information that is extremely well referenced and researched. And to do that, it's extremely time consuming. So, for my team, I will put out 4 pieces of long form content on YouTube. And that is like an entire day of like just filming, not to mention the days of work that go into creating the articles, referencing everything. The downside is that there is a lot of misinformation. So, I think it's important for people to recognize that there are different levels and quality of information that's out there. And, that's difficult to discern if somebody doesn't have a scientific background. Well, some people are just completely unaware that there is a hierarchy of, knowledge. It starts with, meta-analyses and systematic reviews on a topic. Like that is the highest quality sources of information that we can get, because it's taking all of the scientific studies, it's kind of putting them together and then trying to discern, fact from fiction or find the answers. Kind of scales down from there. And, I just the other day I had a conversation with somebody on a post that I'd put up on Instagram, and their reference was, well, such and such says this. I read it in like the Huffington Post, I don't know, whatever newspaper it was. And somebody that reads research every day, it was just like, this is so frustrating. Like the average person doesn't realize that. So yeah, I don't know that there is a solution, but I do think that, for educators, it's really important to make sure that we're cautious in the way that we deliver information. And it's also up to the individual to seek out factual information. What are their credentials? And, where is that information coming from? And am I stuck in an echo chamber? Do I need to diversify who I'm getting my information from? Lots of pros. I think, access to cooking channels. I mean, I look at that many recipes and things. I mean, how convenient and awesome is that? There's just more food awareness, there's more support, there's more community. But, I think there is that downside too. Diet culture is another thing that I think comes up quite a bit in my conversations, at least with clients.
Yeah, I think for me, talking with people, friends and family, it's always like, I saw that I need to cut out carbs, or I need to only do this diet, keto, whatever it might be. What do you think about that? Like when people are like, I need to just completely, I can't ever have a carb. Is there any validity to that, or is that a little extreme?
I think that would fall into the extreme camp. So I think anyone that is preaching extreme approaches, like with very rigid black and white guidelines, they're probably missing the bigger picture. But I guess speaking as a dietitian, carbohydrates are really important. I know I struggled with an eating disorder for about 15 years, even as an educated dietitian. So I think there's a lot of psychological influence and societal pressure as well that kind of goes into what shapes our beliefs and our understanding of certain topics. But carbohydrates are very good, and particularly for people that are, resistance training. If you're going in and doing a good, solid, like hypertrophy, muscle building focused program, resistance training is a very glycolytic sport. It demands carbohydrates. You're almost doing yourself an injustice if you're not eating carbohydrate. And any of those extreme dietary approaches tend to lead us towards unhealthy, eating patterns. And again, as somebody that struggled with an eating disorder for many years, I'm extremely cautious with, how I present different nutrition approaches to people, because I don't want them to fall into this unhealthy obsession with food. And I think with the call out culture and the fear mongering culture and the charlatan culture that we see on social media and just media in general, we have to be very mindful with what we, I guess, allow to come in to, our space. Otherwise you can become very misinformed and find yourself in a very bad place.
Yeah, that was going to lead me to, I wanted to talk about that. Like, how do we know, all right, we're focusing on being healthy and we're ingesting this information and we're trying to stick to a schedule and regimen and whatever it might be. But how do we make sure that it doesn't fall into sort of like an unhealthy obsession and potentially lead to an eating disorder?
It's such a difficult question. Look, I think it starts with having self-awareness. Honestly, I was just completely so aloof when I was young and wasn't really paying attention. I was very mindless, careless, and probably low emotional intelligence, if I'm being really honest. So the older we get, I think hopefully many of us are becoming a bit more aware of what's going on. When it comes to nutrition specifically, I would say if you are concerned that you are moving down that pathway, some of the symptoms or warning signs would be you've adopted some kind of dietary approach that is extreme. It eliminates whole food groups, as carbohydrates would be an example, or it eliminates all fruits. I hear people all the time saying, oh, I had 25 grams of sugar today. Am I over my sugar allotment? Or I shouldn't be eating fruit. Just like insane things like this. And again, for the average person, maybe they don't realize that that's insane. So, until you come across an educated person that can kind of, validate and explain why it's actually okay to include these things, then can you realize, oh, I might be going down the wrong path here. But I know for me, when I was really struggling with my eating disorder, there was a constant preoccupation with food. So I would excessively worry about foods. I definitely had foods categorized good and bad. I remember when I was young, I had this notebook that, I'd track my food. I was using the Calorie King books back in the day before we had apps and trackers that we could use on our phones. And I remember seeing I had bad crossed over certain things. There was always feelings of guilt and stress anytime, it came to eating off a plan. So it was a lot of emotional stress. And I think with that, there's this kind of coupling effect where we're also thinking about our physique, we're worrying about our appearance. And I know, I totally had body dysmorphia. People would say, oh no, you're very small, or you're lean, or you're not overweight. And I had this completely different perception of what I actually looked like. So those would be some other symptoms I think that people need to be aware of, or body checking, comparing pictures, comparing yourself with social media influencers. And the downside is all of that leads to, depression, anxiety, poor mental health in general. Those would be some of the initial warning signs that I think might be indicative of somebody's moving towards maybe unhealthy obsession with food. And it can also extend to, we flip things around, excessive exercise as well, or compensatory behavior, where somebody's now, if they eat this bad food, then they have to do X amount of activity, or really extreme responses to something that is relatively, to a healthy-minded individual, should be really small.
Yeah, I think calorie counting, I'm not sure what your stance on that. Some people feel like that could lead to that same sort of obsession where it's like, oh, I went over this, so I have to run and burn that off. And, is there something behind that, or is that? Well, what is your
Yeah,
thought?
absolutely. So
Yeah.
I find myself in an interesting predicament because I actually built a nutrition coaching app which is founded on the principles of flexible dieting. So it ascribes or prescribes a protein, carbohydrate, and fat target. But, I think anyone that inherently like chooses to track macros or, manipulate their diet, they are subjecting themselves to certain risks when it comes to food. So you're exactly right. Tracking calories, tracking macros poses risk to developing disordered eating or eating disorders. So I think people need to be aware of that and just recognize, time and a place. As a dietitian and somebody that genuinely cares for people's health outcomes, not just their physical health, but their mental health as well, I think that macro tracking and flexible dieting is a fantastic tool. It's something that I think we should all learn about, or at least for a period of our lives, spend time learning about the constituents of food. That way we can make informed decisions about what we're fueling, our bodies with. So I personally tracked macros and still do when I compete, but only when I'm competing in a competition. I don't track macros when I'm not competing. But, 2 decades worth of tracking macros and learning food, I have such a huge knowledge and breadth of understanding of what foods are and how that influences my body. But at the same token, I don't think that it's something that we should all have to rely on forever. I think one of the things that I've kind of explained to clients that I've worked with is that if you are constantly, checking your macro tracking app and, you're looking at how many calories I've got left for the day, or I have to meet this goal, it takes away from our intuitive ability to auto regulate. And I have had so many people, unfortunately, that have, found freedom with flexible dieting. It's taken away that good and bad, dichotomous relationship with food, because now, all foods are suddenly on an even playing field and they can track things and it's just math. But then they almost become so dependent on flexible dieting and tracking macros that they are now so reliant on their phone. And, God help something happen, or they can't track or do things perfectly. They've lost the ability to self-regulate. So I actually work a lot with people on the other side of the fence as well, who are they've gathered their knowledge, they have good food understanding, and now they're trying to step away from that to kind of find a better balance. So I'll teach people how to approach that, what things they might come up against, and to learn intuitive eating again. Now they can make informed decisions, but they don't have to rely on their phones for everything.
That's a good way to, yeah, I could picture that, right? A lot of people I talk to have kids and they feel like they want to be healthier. They want to eat better. They see the ultra processed things we're seeing. They also know that their kids go to school and sit next to other kids that are handed bags of food, these ultra processed snacks as their meals. Those kids, their friends that go to fast food. They don't want their kids to be completely shut off from the world, but they also want them to eat healthier without creating that sort of anxiety, food related anxiety. How do you sort of navigate that as a parent?
With great difficulty. So I think, and it's really challenging because I think even as adults, we don't always have the greatest eating habits ourselves. So one part of me wants to say, as a responsible adult, we should be the ones that are modeling healthy eating behaviors to our children. But look at the nonsense that we see online. There's so much information, no one knows what's good, what's bad. So I think it's a difficult position to be in. But my mantra, not just for me, but for my children, would be to approach it from a place of balance. Avoid food labels. There aren't good foods and bad foods. All foods serve purpose, even those that don't have lots of micronutrients. If we're thinking about mixed candy or lollies or something like that, that serves a great purpose for maybe an endurance athlete or somebody that needs quick energy immediately, for various sports. So I think, we tend to slap labels on things, but ultimately all foods have a place in our diet. Some are just more nutritionally rich. They have more vitamins and minerals. So in an ideal world, yes, we want to focus on most of those things, but it's okay to have some of the other stuff as well. So I generally approach things with an 80-20 rule. If 80% of your diet is, whole grains, you're getting good fiber, you're getting protein, you've got a bit of all the food groups, It's perfectly fine to have a cookie. It's perfectly reasonable. I have one every day, believe it or not. A giant cookie from, I can't remember what the name of the company is, Dave's something rather, Killer Cookies. I think people kind of find themselves like living in fear when it comes to food because there's so much bad information. So balanced approach is really important for parents, encouraging variety. And again, often it comes back to, we place our own bias and our own habits on our children sometimes, and it's not often a malicious thing. It's just we know what we know. So you tend to pass those habits on to your children. So I think it's up to the parent to also be really responsible in their own health so that they can also teach their children good habits. So balance, variety, avoiding labels. I have seen that quite a bit. Something else that I would probably err against, and maybe there's another, child educator or nutrition educator that might disagree with me, but I think that using food as reward or punishment is probably not the best approach, kind of associating a certain behavior with food. And, food should be, viewed through the lens of this is nourishment. This is, something that's good for my body, not something that I get if I do well or if I do poorly, taking things away, if I don't do this. I don't like the idea of using food, reward or punishment. So, in those situations, because I know a lot, like I've sat with, my former stepchildren, and I have heard people in my space say, you won't be getting this if you, don't eat that. And I'm like, oh no. So I would prefer to use like non-food related incentives. Like your child is able to go and have some more playtime if you try these new things. And then also just giving your children like the education around, the different types of foods and what they help you with. You're sure this might not taste very good, but, we do things for more than just pleasure. I don't go to the gym all the time just because it brings me pleasure. I do it because I know it's good for my health. I don't like going for runs all the time, but sometimes I will do things that I don't enjoy, but I know that there are going to be some other long-term, benefits. So yeah, I think educating your kids around what's in food, how they help us, in different ways, and take away the fear and just encourage variety. And I think one of the things that I remember when I was back in my clinical days at Dietetics working with children was that you need to expose your children to something or new foods at least 20 times. So you might have tried the green beans 5 times. Like keep trying, try it in different ways, try to make it fun and creative just to kind of, leave a positive experience, I think, with kids rather than making it like a miserable, dreaded time.
Some people that don't have kids and they say, okay, I am slammed with work. I'm trying to get to the gym. I'm trying to see my friends. Maybe they're building a business on the side after their day gig. Would that 80-20 rule be a good, like, hey, if you can do nothing else when it comes to food, just stick to that and then work in other things as you kind of free up more time?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Look, I think that rule probably shifts a little bit when I'm working with somebody that is in an intentional like cutting or a fat loss phase. The lower your calorie intakes based on your lean body mass, unfortunately, your micronutrient requirements do not change. That ratio tends to become a little bit more skewed towards 100% of your foods being from whole foods, healthy, nutritious foods when you are on restricted calories. Just as an example, I'm an easy one because I compete. My normal maintenance calories when I'm not trying to diet and when I'm fueling for performance and trying to be strong, I might eat 2,000 calories a day, for example. But, as I'm entering into a cutting phase and maybe by the end, like in week 16, 18 or whatever it might be, my calories might get down to very close to my basal metabolic rate, like maybe 1,200 calories for, I'm a 135-pound individual. I might end up eating a very low amount of calories during that specific period of time. So unfortunately, like during those times, I would say that rule's probably less accurate. I would be focusing on having mostly, whole food so that I don't become, frank deficient in micronutrients. But I think if you're eating at maintenance and you're just trying to strive for good health, then yes, use the 80-20 rule. I think it's a more realistic, obtainable goal. And I think most of us tend to get in these extreme thoughts or schools of thought, and nothing extreme usually is sustainable. So yes, I love the 80-20 rule.
Yeah, because I was gonna say most people listening, you can be very regimented. You can turn it on and turn it off. It sounds like, especially when you're in training, and that's probably when you're tracking a lot more. Are there like apps or tools, tech that you recommend for people in their everyday life, devices that you like that won't make them, obsessed with their progress?
I think, well, you mentioned obsession. I think that probably comes back to the individual. I think anytime we, use an app or something, we're a victim potentially, or we can fall susceptible to that obsession. I think the onus there is, number one, we need to be aware of the inherent risks when we track macros, but just being self-aware and thinking about how, this tool that I might be using is affecting my life. Is it a bigger plus or is it having more of a negative effect on my overall health and well-being? And I have seen many times people have, in one school of thought, their general health might have improved significantly when it comes to, their blood biomarkers, their BMI, their weight, their body fat percentage. That's changed for the better. Maybe there's some potential perks for, some aesthetic benefit as well. Maybe they're feeling really confident in one hand. But the downside is I've seen those same individuals struggle the most with their mental health, depression, anxiety, just terrible mental health and well-being. So as one thing comes up, the other thing has countered it. So they're actually not in a better position to begin with. I think we need to be aware of the risks, but as somebody that has developed apps, and I also have multiple apps, so the one that I would recommend from a nutrition perspective, and I will have a new one soon, so you'll have to stick around for that, but Carbon Diet Coach is one of the nutrition tracking products. It's actually a coach as well, so it doesn't just track your macros, create recipes, it also allows you to be coached. So it's kind of like having me in your pocket, I guess. So Carbon Diet Coach is a really great tracking app, but there are so many. I still think something like MyFitnessPal is a good tracking tool. It doesn't give you the coaching, week-to-week coaching element, but it's definitely a great place for somebody to educate themselves and just learn about, wow, the foods that I really like, okay, they're quite high in fats, or wow, they're very low in protein, or whatever it might be. Practicing that and getting educated is really important. But another convenient tool, I have a training app as well. It's called Be a Fit. So Be a Fit is a very diverse platform. We have programs for beginners all the way through to advanced lifters and resistance trained athletes, competitors, even like myself, but everything in between. And it has at-home programs, it has gym-based programs, cardio, mobility, warm-ups. It has all of that. And again, it's all based on an evidence-based approach. And I'm heavy in the research space in exercise science. It's kind of the thing that I probably love even more than talking about nutrition. So all of the programs are very well formulated. We're able to kind of track specific metrics from training, which, is incentivizing and motivating for people when they can see their volume improving. It's also comforting to know that, every program that we put together, if you've got specific muscle groups that you want to work on and grow, there are programs that have been specifically designed with the optimal training volume for those muscle groups. And, then there might be some other muscle groups that are just maintenance volumes. So they're very well thought out and put together. So yeah, Be a Fit for training, and I would say Carbon Diet Coach are two of many. I don't want to be just biased and say mine are the best, but I have to be. But there are so many really good tools. You just have to go to the App Store to find them.
Oh no, I'll put the links in the show notes. But I think it's very cool to talk to someone who's actually developed it, because a lot of times when I talk to people, of course, they're recommending third-party apps that they believe in and they use, and it's not, BS. They're actually using them and they recommend them for their clients. But for you to kind of go in there, when you're developing these sort of technologies, how does that because you have such an extensive background, and like you said in the beginning, from the educational standpoint, and sort of like dotting your I's and crossing your T's to make sure that what you put out there is absolutely researched, right? So when you're putting out these apps, like how are you sort of formulating that from someone who, again, might be a complete beginner that needs to, but then someone else that's like, okay, I kind of know what I'm doing, but I just need maybe that coach every day in my ear. Like, are they able to sort of like every day they're going in and checking in and getting, I don't know, like progress reports, so to speak?
Yeah, so I guess from the nutrition coaching app perspective, I mean, there's a pretty complicated logic on the back end and an algorithm. So I think it took us 2 years to build our first app. Again, it was kind of done on the side, so it wasn't, a full team working on it all the time. But I mean, anything that is like high level, like evidence based, it's a slow process to build, I can tell you now. But, as far as how they actually work, you would provide a bunch of information, all of your anthropometric information. your goals, your body weight, those types of things. And then each week you're basically tracking your macros. We'll obviously provide you those targets, and then you get to check in with the coach. So you answer a few questions. We pull all of your data on the back end anyway, and we can kind of look at what your averages are and how you did based on your performance that week. We can then make easy adjustments for you. So it's a pretty cool process. It's what I do with my in-person clients, but we've kind of found a way to automate it by writing an algorithm, if you will. So yes, you check in once a week, and it's the same for my training app as well. You kind of get to check in, view all of your data. You'll get a little coaching message that tells you kind of how you've gone and where you can improve. So they're very functional, easy products to use.
Well, how about in nutrition science, and a lot of listeners might say, what is nutrition science? But that's sort of like your wheelhouse. What sort of new developments in nutrition science excite you the most?
I think exactly probably what I've just described. If we think about how many coaching apps there would be under 10. Nutrition tracking apps, so food trackers, have been around for probably the last decade. Oh, and I've seen many, many more developments of food tracking apps. I mean, you just have to get your hands on a food database to kind of create and have the vision. But something that is actually scientifically proven, it's founded on an evidence-based approach, one that follows a sustainable approach. Nothing that we do is going to allow you to do extreme things. Our ultimate goal is to help people do things through a moderate, sustainable approach, one that is keeping in mind the preservation of your lean body mass. We don't want you to just drop 25 pounds in a few weeks, like the front of magazine covers will often say. We know that that's extremely detrimental to your metabolic health. We want you to diet in a way that preserves as much lean body mass as possible. And there are very specific approaches that afford you to do that. So just as an example, if you are dieting, you do not want to be losing at a rate that is greater than, say, 1.5% of your total body weight per week. I have clients, new people come to us all the time, and they're like, all right, I want to drop 30 pounds in the next 10 weeks. I've got a wedding I'm going to. And I'm like, okay, well, that's 4% of your body weight per week. So definitely not. And then but I've done that before, it was very successful. And I'm like, well, why are we here now? So, you've got to think about the long-term implications of some of these strategies. So I'm most excited about the advances in nutrition sciences. So the research that's going on, exercise science, we've been a part of that. The lab here at the University of South Florida is probably leading the way in terms of finding out the optimal strategy to build muscle for natural athletes. So I think I'm most excited about the increased advancement and interest in that area, and then how that's kind of conveying into these automated tools. I mean, I've seen several apps that are integrating now psychology, which, we've had food tracking apps, but food is more than just good or bad. There's the person that lives behind those thoughts that's making decisions. And you could have all the knowledge in the world, but if you can't make good decisions through poor psychology or dysfunctional beliefs, you're not going to make the right choices. So there's a behavioral element. So I think that's what excites me the most. I think that all of these specialty areas are kind of coming together, recognizing that the problems that we have as humans in terms of obesity and chronic disease, they are multifaceted. It's not just sugar is bad. It's not that, this is bad. It's that there are so many different influences affecting our ability to execute and achieve our goals. So, we're kind of teaming up with different professions now to kind of optimize over here, optimize over there, and spin it into an app that can be affordable for everybody and accessible to everybody. So, I mean, most of these products that I sell at least are under $15 a month, and you're, instead of paying thousands for a one-on-one coach, which is what you would do if you worked with me individually, they're really cheap. So yeah, that's the area that I'm really excited about, and getting that in the hands of just the, everyday personal trainer, or, the brand new fresh out of school nutritionist who needs a really evidence-based tool that works well for them.
Look, this has been great. I know listening to you break all this down has been invaluable. So thank you so much for your time today. For people who just want to connect with you, right? Is there a website where they can sort of access everything and follow you online? Is there one website to visit, or
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay.
I have multiple websites, but the place
Yeah.
where you can find everything is Beer Body. So yeah, beerbody.com. It's BIA-BODY. So you'll be able to access like all of our products and services, educational books, podcasts. We have a research review that kind of dumbs down and makes science a bit more palatable. We talked before about people really struggling to know where to get good information. So we have a review that, you know, is suitable for just the everyday person who kind of wants to know the truth but isn't ready to go and become a researcher. So yeah, Beer Body has all of our products and services.
Okay, I'll put that in the show notes. Like I said, thank you so much for your time today. Great to meet you. Great to learn from you, and thank you so much for sharing this everything with the audience.
Awesome. I appreciate being here. Thank you for having me.